Dina Zuckerberg from MyFace. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for willing to come and talk to me as well.
Yeah, I'm
So
excited.
today, we want to learn about you, we want to learn about MyFace, and we want to learn more about the amazing Wonder project that you guys are doing. Could you start just by introducing yourself? Like, who is Dina?
Yes. So I am the Director of Family Programs at MyFace. I was born with a cleft lip, hearing loss in both ears. I hear nothing on my right, with a hearing aid on my left, and no vision in my left eye. But as I like to tell the kids, it's never stopped me from doing anything I've ever wanted to do. I can drive, I can ride a bicycle, play the piano, I can ski. I can even ski what's called a double black diamond with really steep with lots of little bumps on it. I did it once with a ski instructor. I will never do it again. I'm going to admit it was quite scary. She's like, "You want to do it again?" I'm like, "No, no, no, no." But so these challenges have really never stopped me from doing anything I've ever wanted to do. And I love what I get to do at MyFace and helping these families. When I was a child, I was teased. Kids would say mean things. They would stare. I would sit alone in the lunchroom and on the school bus. And those moments have stayed with me even today. And so when I came to MyFace, I really wanted no child to go through what I did. And that was sort of the basis of the work that I do. I always think about that.
Would you say that your childhood has shaped you into the adult that you are today?
Absolutely. In fact, when I talk to students, sometimes I'll get asked, "Do you wish it could have been easier? Do you wish it could have been not so hard?" What I say, because I had to think about this a lot, is what I say is that, yeah, do I wish it could have been a little easier? Sure. But I also recognize that I wouldn't be the person I am today doing the work that I do if not for the experience that I had growing up. And so I'm not sure I would really change anything. Yeah, maybe it could have been a little easier. What I didn't say also is that I had 6 surgeries growing up, years of braces, it felt like forever, and speech therapy when I was a child. So I also dealt with that as well growing up. But I
Was
do
that
believe it shaped me into who I am today.
was that readily available in the schools when you were younger?
Meaning what was readily available.
Like, was therapy and access to care and
Yes.
support systems in the school?
Yes. I went to a small elementary school, very small. So I had one-on-one when I needed it. So and I also had, it was more readily available for me. I think, honestly, I don't know how much, if my parents had to fight for any of it, but I did have those services when I was in school.
Nice. So your parents must have been a huge support system then, especially with bullying and comments at school. I think that's a aspect that a lot of folks seem to forget, that some kids have great support systems at home and others do not. So they need the extra assistance from other people.
Absolutely. I I think a lot of also my resilience and perseverance is my parents. I remember my dad saying all the time that I could do anything I set my mind to. And so he always liked to tell the story of, which is probably why I can ski a double black diamond, was how when I was young, maybe 7 or 8, I had a ski instructor and I would climb up the bunny hill and ski down. And he said I could just do this all day long. I don't really remember it. I remember the ski instructor, Dennis, but so I think that has played a role as well as my perseverance and resilience. So
Yeah, it's amazing. People that can help build you up throughout your life as well. It makes confidence and self-esteem that much better. I know a lot of
absolutely.
people in the MyFace community and others with disabilities as well. Self-esteem and self-acceptance is still a
Yeah.
journey which is going to take a long time.
I was
So,
just going to say, I think self acceptance is a journey. I'm still on that journey of self acceptance and I'm in my 50s. So, yeah, it takes time for sure.
yeah, I think being willing to talk about it as well is a huge deal.
Uh,
I didn't start talking about it until recently. And once you start, you think you've accepted it, but once you start stripping back the layers of complexity and, you talk about, if you not cringe at when you're talking about yourself in a quite a vulnerable way, but even if you're just willing to talk to others, that's a huge step because so many people internalize how they feel. And
right.
that can cascade in terms of mental health.
Yeah. I was the child that never talked about it. So I came home from school, said everything was fine. I just in some ways just plowed through life. And it was not until my early 20s when I joined what was a support group for teens and adults with craniofacial differences. And I remember meeting this young woman who was already part of that group, and she said it was before cell phones and all of that. And she said, I met her at a party and she said, you're coming to the next meeting. I was like, no, 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 no. And then she kept calling me on my home phone and kept encouraging me to come. And so I did. And that sort of was the moment when I walked into that meeting that changed my life forever, because it was, I, like so many others especially in the adult community, I never had that, or I never was open to it either. I think when I was young, like Augie in the book Wonder, I wanted to fit in, not stand out so much, but that changed my life. And we actually did a theater production. When I came into that group, they were putting together a theater production called Let's Face the Music. We wrote it and then we performed it over a weekend at the One Dream Theater, which seemed like the perfect theater to do it at. And we told our stories through skits, music, and what we called mirror logs, looking in the mirror, what do you see? And it was so powerful, especially because many of us had never even been up on stage. And then here we were talking about our stories, and that being part of that group then and doing that theater production, talk about shaping who I am today, I think really also contributed to who I am today and the work that I do, why I'm so passionate about the work that I do at MyFace.
Yeah, that's amazing. Being willing to be vulnerable is a huge step in the first place, right?
Absolutely.
I know friends who struggle with mental health and they still struggle to, which, I get it. They still struggle to open up and talk about it because there is
Yeah,
still that stigma around it. And especially folks with physical differences going out in public, it's such a huge deal because
absolutely. I
you,
never could have imagined that I'd be doing the work that I do today. I mean, if you asked me that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I would have said you're crazy. I mean, and but it's interesting. I think there's a difference between being out there publicly and being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is hard. I mean, to admit or say certain things, or I think it's really hard. It is not easy to do that. So I still work on that too. I mean, to show my vulnerability, because it's not easy.
there's a quote, right? I think it says, I don't know who said it, do one hard thing a day. And something
Yeah.
like don't be afraid to do one hard thing every day. And I think folks equate hard things to, whether it's exercising or, cleaning the house or apartment or, calling an old friend. But to many in the visible difference community, just, getting out, going outside and living their life day to day can be hard enough, right? Someone
Yes.
who's afraid to walk down, like in New York, walk down Fifth Avenue when
Yes.
you feel like you stand out, maybe physically, but also mentally as well, which
Absolutely.
you might, whatever, if you got a port wine stain or scarring or cleft lip, you might think in your own head that, physically I'm going to stand up, but it's the mental aspect, which is often the biggest barrier as well. And like you
Yeah.
said, you're still on that journey. I'm still on that journey.
Yes.
And I think it's a constant journey. There is no definitive end, right? There's no end
Right.
metric to I've achieved success now. There are still ignorant people in the world who still need to learn and how to interact with others who don't necessarily fit society's definition of normal.
Exactly. I don't think there is any such thing as normal in some ways.
So when you started your career, did you start work in advocacy or did you move into advocacy work?
I moved into it. So when I graduated college, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I went to work at a corporate law firm as a litigation paralegal. In some ways, I never worked so hard in my life when I did that job. I learned pretty quickly that I didn't want to do that. I mean, it took me 2 years. It was a 2-year program. Then I went to work for something called the Authors Guild because I always loved books and I thought that would be fun. Did that for a while. It was fun. It was basically they help authors um, with the legal and getting published and all the things that come with that. I got to meet really fun, amazing writers, and then went to work for 8 years in finance at Goldman Sachs, and that over 8 years, and that it was a great job, and I learned a lot that even if I didn't stay in finance are really helpful today. But then after that, I came to MyFace, and I've been at MyFace now. September will be 12 years. So, and it's something that I kind of always am in the back of my mind, always wanted to do, but it was opportunity opened up and I seized the moment, as they say. So, and I love that I get, it's where my passion is for sure.
So before we talk about MyFace, and that's amazing. How was it entering the corporate world as someone with a visible difference, especially an establishment like Goldman Sachs? I know a few folks that have worked there, and I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
How was that for you, entering the corporate world, interviewing, socializing, working with clients as someone, not necessarily just as a visible difference, but within your own mentality? You know, when you go to work every day thinking, I have a visible difference, I wonder what.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think for me at the time, I don't know. I feel like I spent so much of my life just plowing through, trying not to think about it, and yet it was kind of always there. And what I mean is how I presented myself to the world. I think that it kind of blocked it out in some ways. But that said, when I say how I presented myself to the world, I think I put up a wall in some ways. So it was a little harder for me to socialize and really connect with people because I think through my childhood into my adult years, I had built a bit of a wall around me. And so I think in some ways that was probably my biggest challenge. That said, I met some amazing people and, a couple of them I'm still friendly with today, from my days at Goldman Sachs. But I think that that was just true in my seasons, in some ways, even to my early 40s. I think it was just how I presented myself to the world. And I think I presented myself with a bit of a wall around me. And that wall, let me tell you, when you built that wall up, it is really hard to take it down. But I feel like in the last 10, 12, 15 years have begun to really chip away at that wall. And so it's not as much a stone wall maybe as I don't know, a glass wall. So I can look at, I'm not even sure what it is, but it's definitely a wall that I've chipped away at.
No, it makes sense. It's almost like a double mirror as well, right?
Yeah,
You want to act confident and be confident, but you also introspectively thinking to yourself all the time, do I look confident or do I appear confident because of this
yeah,
visible difference? It's almost like you have to overcompensate for an attribute that you didn't have any control over.
exactly, exactly. And
And that,
there's always conversations going on in the back of my mind. What do people think? Do they see it? Am I trying too hard? Do people see it? All these things that go on in the back of my mind and have these little conversations over the years. For a lot of years growing up, I think I thought that this was all of me. This defined me in some ways. And I think, again, in the last 10, 12 years, what I realized is just a piece of me. It's not all of me, that I am so much more than my facial difference. But again, it's taken me a lot of years to get to this point.
it's fantastic answer. Because, you give a presentation or in a corporate event. I had to do a presentation on financials in the healthcare system and to a medical device company. And when you get told things in your previous, years at fairs and things like that, and you're presenting, and not a normal person, because again, what is normal? But they present, give the information, answer questions, move forward, iterate, carry on. But when you have visible difference, before you even start that presentation, you're stood there, you have that extra barrier of, do I look okay? What are they thinking about my appearance? Do I look
But
like, someone mentioned I look like a thug, like, do I look like a thug to them? Like, do I need to talk in a certain, and it's,
exactly.
you replay these certain moments and situations, which may be true, may not be true,
I,
but when it's in your own head, like you said with the wall, it's extremely hard to get rid of. And, you get that answer of, oh, don't worry about it. You look fine. But you tell that to someone with a visible difference, it's just like, what are
right,
you going to do? Painting a brush over a very thin line, which is deeper than like the Grand
right,
Canyon almost.
right, right, right. I know what I was thinking is that I think the challenge also is, and I think I dealt with this over the years too, is the things that people think about us that we're not smart or that we're not capable just by looking at us sometimes and our facial difference. I always say when we meet somebody for the first time, we typically shake their hand and we look at each other's faces. And so I think that in some ways is really hard again to break down, or the things that people think about us, the implicit biases that we deal with. And I think I get it. When you are meeting somebody for the first time with a facial difference, especially kids, right? It can be, I've never seen somebody like that. And to be curious about it, right? I get it. It's a totally natural response. But I think having done talk to students, sometimes I think adults need it more than the kids do, because just their responses can be sometimes hard too. And I don't know if it's because they're not fully aware, and I get it. Again, you've not seen it for the first ever before, so you might be a little bit surprised or curious. But I think in some ways in the workplace, I think that in some ways is the biggest challenge of how the assumptions people make. So when you go into an interview and they see that you look different, how is that going to impact the environment and the work that you do? And I think that, and it's so subtle. Like, I don't even think it's always obvious to people. And I think people, and maybe they're right, people will say, oh, like, you're overreacting, or it's not, maybe it's not really what you think it is. And maybe it's true. But I think sometimes, I know for me, I'm sensitive to that, and I feel it sometimes. And I'm not even sure that those people necessarily are fully aware of their implicit biases. I mean, I think we all have that to some degree. We just do. So anyway.
I had a instance where I was talking on the phone to someone. They were like, "Oh, you got a British accent. This is in the US," and they were like, "Oh, you come and talk to us about this." And I was trying to not sell them something, but try to get them on board with the product. And I turned up to do the in-person talking, and they're like, "Oh, wow, didn't realize we were talking to like James Bond or a British thug."
Oh, well.
And I was like, great. Like
Yeah.
they think it's funny and they think
Yeah,
it's cool, but it's like instantly, if you live your life when you've had comments and abuse
that's
for
right.
years and years, it's just like your focus goes from selling a product and delivering a product to now thinking the whole time, like, oh boy, like didn't expect that when you walk in.
Challenge. I think that's the challenge that I think people face in the workplace in some ways. Or
Yeah.
can. And not that they do, but they can.
One comment and triggering comment it's then the ability to react in the moment. And to people with visible differences, we have this innate ability to instinctively or naturally react in pretty not extreme circumstances, but and I said this before, to react to a retaliative or comment and to act compassionate and to be kind and understand that in the moment is extremely hard. And it's a skill, tenacity. You lead with authenticity, but the skill set you actually acquire by having a visible difference goes a long way. And again, most
Yes.
people don't really have to deal with that in their day-to-day life.
But sometimes I wish I have that sometimes when I don't always respond in the way I want to in the moment, and then afterwards I'm like, I wish I responded this way. But sometimes I get the response, have a delayed response. So that's a challenge as well sometimes. But I agree with what you were just saying.
Yeah. I said to my friend Andy in the UK when we chatted that folks with visible differences, we have this like, again, innate ability, but it's almost like an IQ and intelligence level because you've had to live difference. Obviously, if you had an acquired facial difference, I acquired mine at a young age.
Right.
People acquire them later in adulthood. People born with them, and yeah, you have this unique intelligence to kind of not read people, but to like it's kind of like not a fight or flight response.
So true.
But you can not judge people because obviously that's awful. But you get a comment or a remark, and you're like, okay, do they mean this in curiosity? Do they mean this in aggression? Is this like, are they genuinely asking? And yeah, the people that I've met within the visible difference community are all super intelligent, and I think there is a correlation there between having to live life looking different and the way that you're mind and brain works towards understanding unique situations.
I agree. I really do agree with that. It'd be an interesting research project at some point. Understand that.
I reached out to a professor at the University of Houston about a year ago, and I read a few papers, enjoyed reading, and I emailed him, and I also emailed his lab partner as well, and they both responded within the same day, and they were like, "This is the first email I've had in maybe 6 to 8 months regarding this paper." And I sent them an email, just, this is what happened to me, and this is who I've spoken with, different organizations. But this paper is very insightful, and I'd love to, learn more. And if there's other contributors that you work with who study, psychosocial aspects of visible differences, anxiety, depression, living life, other research. And he says there isn't much funding regarding the
Right.
focal point, but it's at University of Houston and Rice University. He said that it is a class that so many kids at university want to attend because everybody in the class worries about what they look like, whether they have a visible difference or not.
Wow.
And I said to him at the time, I was like, you should look into, doing speeches or getting people involved in the visible difference community, coming in, talking to class, whether it's virtual or in person, because again, we're and it sounds terrible, real life case studies, right? On,
Right.
you're very successful. Others in the community are extremely successful. And you've had to overcome so many barriers to achieve that success. And it'd just be interesting to, not do neurotransmitting studies or, neural networks, but to really dive deep into the analytical and behavioral science of people in the visible difference community.
So I have spoken to medical students at different dental schools and medical students, and I love doing that because they just get what they learn from the textbooks, but to actually hear from the community, they get so much out of it. I mean, and so I do that year after year at a couple of schools, and I just love doing that because I'm hoping that what we say or what I say really helps. And I have a list of pieces of advice that I give them. For example, when a parent has a child with a visible difference, say congratulations, because sometimes they go right to what's wrong or what happened, but rather just say congratulations. And that I've heard from parents how that can just change everything for them. And talking not to the patient in the room as well, not just to the parents in the room, especially as they get older. I mean, all these pieces of advice. So I think education is so important, especially to the medical community as well, dental.
Yeah. I remember what Paige at the gala and Adam said as well about, raising the bar and removing people
Exactly.
and
I
being
love
born
that.
to stand out and don't be afraid and live your life. It's just so powerful hearing it from others in the community, because researchers and professors and TV adverts, people on TV can say all they want, but when information and insights comes from those in the visible difference community or works in the visible difference community, it has that much more power behind it, because they know what it's like to work with or to live life with a visible difference.
Absolutely. 100%.
So moving on to MyFace, an amazing organization. Can you tell me a bit more about the work that you do on a day-to-day basis with MyFace and any projects that you're currently working on?
Yes. So like I said, when I came to MyFace, I really wanted no child to go through what I did growing up. And that sort of became the basis to the programming that I created or helped to create. And so we have support groups that are now virtual for children, adolescents, adults, and parents. So we have and also a Spanish speaking parent support group and also a prenatal infant parent support group. So if you have a child, because, for example, with CLAP, you can find out even on a sonogram, even before the baby is born, and then it's up to 1 year. And I always say that there's power in the shared story and knowing you're not alone. And I see it over and over again in these support groups. And the example that I always, because it stayed with me even today, is a parent of a 3-year-old whose child was in the hospital more than out of the hospital. And the parent feeling completely overwhelmed, and then having a parent of a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old saying it does get easier. and then the parent of a 20-something-year-old who is a nurse at a hospital and working with these very kids and she has a visible difference and how she's now working and how that can just be so helpful to parents. And then we have an adult group which I peer lead and hearing over and over again, I wish I had this when I was growing up. And so that connection, that realizing you're not alone is so powerful. And then we have webinars, podcasts that I host, My Face, My Story. We give out backpacks through Tiny Faces, backpacks to new parents through 50 or so craniofacial teens at hospitals, backpacks with everything they need for the first month of their life. And then we are doing community engagement events, virtual and in person. And then I'm sure I'm missing things, but also then the Wonder Project, where we go into schools speaking to kids about visible differences, choosing kindness, and being an upstander, not a bystander. And that is a program that I am particularly passionate about. Is based on the young adult novel Wonder by R.J. Palacio, which if people have not read, I highly recommend. And so, since starting that program, we've reached about 100,000 students. That is a program that I am very passionate about.
It's a lot of kids.
A lot of kids. And hopefully, I always say, sometimes we go into a school and I wonder, I always say, even if we've reached 5 kids, I feel like we've done something right.
What was so starting with the Wonder Project,
Mhm.
which Rena mentioned when we spoke, and see it, you guys publishing it and reading about it, which again is incredible because like you said, if or I'm sure many in the community had that as when they were at school, or for friends, or for parents of other kids who had multiple questions, remarks, or comments that they'd like to share, whether it was off the cuff or maybe they just wanted to have their voice heard, would have gone a long way.
Yeah, I didn't have any of this when I was in school.
Yeah.
I mean, none of this existed.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting if something like this was in place back when you were at school, or I was at school,
Yeah,
for your parents, for yourself,
absolutely.
how life would have been different in terms of maybe self-acceptance and just mental health in general.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
Because when you're told as a child that, like you said earlier, if you're told by a support structure that, not that you're amazing and you can't do anything wrong, because obviously then that leads to other issues. But if you're told that like you're beautiful, or you're handsome, or you're going to be successful, you're such a kind person, like you're doing so well, like we're so proud of you, and not just to hear that from parents, but to hear from people like you who are going into schools, and Naomi who are going into schools and telling that to kids, like that is so powerful and something which you can hold on to for the rest of your life. My wife's a 4th grade teacher, and she's taught now for 7.5 years. And she has her first classroom will see her out, the street or in the town and be like, hey, like, thank you so much for doing this for me. And I think when you're teaching kids, you forget the impact that you are having on them that will carry forwards. So when you've gone into schools, what was the when you did it for the first time, what was going through your head, and what was the initial reactions of parents, teachers, and kids when you originally like pitched the idea for the first time?
Yeah. So I'll step back for a minute and say, so when the young adult novel Wonder by R.J. Palacio came out, about 12, 13 years now. When I read that book for the first time, I read it, I think, practically over one weekend. It was life-changing because in some ways it was the first book that I read where I really resonated with Augie, the main character. And for those who don't know, Wonder is a novel about a boy who was born with a craniofacial difference. He's had 27 surgeries. He's homeschooled until the 5th grade, and then he's mainstreamed into school. And it's what happens in that year. And there's Julian, who's the bully, and how it all plays out. And it really opened my eyes, and it was like, wow, like there's a book that I can totally relate to, that this is being talked about even. And we decided that we wanted to create a curriculum guide and then start going into schools and speaking to students. And I was doing a little bit of it in 2015. And I actually I don't remember the actual first school. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't remember exactly what I was thinking then. But what I do remember is going back to the elementary school that I went to pretty early on, and that was really interesting. First of all, when I walked into the school, it was way smaller than I remembered it. Funny. And that was really powerful for me because here I was in this very school that I was dealing with all of this with, and I spoke to students, and it was pretty early on, so I talked about my story, and I was sort of getting my feet wet with all of this in terms of, I mean, this has evolved and changed so much to what it is today. But it was really in 2017, 18 when the movie came out that it just took off. So that year, we had gone into 76 schools, all in person at the time. And it was just, that was the whole year. And we were just going one school after another. And we had reached about 20,000 plus students that year. I even went to Canada to do a school, speak to 600 students because everybody was reading it, everybody was seeing the movie. And then it's been pretty consistent since then each year. And I just love doing it. Again, if you said to me, I mean, that first time I did it, I was so nervous. If you said to me that I could do this, I would have said, you're crazy. No, I would not be, I couldn't do this. And yet I can't get enough of doing it because even just the other day, we went to a school last week and there was a student there who had a limb difference, and she was so excited that we came to talk to her school. And we took a picture afterwards, and then I'm sending her a book of a friend of mine who she wrote a book about having a limb difference. We gave it out at our gala. And just seeing the impact, even on just one student. One of my favorite, I have two favorite stories. One is quite a number of years ago, going into a school, and I talked about wearing a hearing aid. And I said, I wear a hearing aid. And this kid got all excited, raised his hand, and he said he had double hearing aids. And he had never met somebody young like him who had hearing aids like that. And so it was right when R.J. Palacio had done a picture book called Willow Wonders, and I had it with me. And he asked if he could read it to the students. So it was a classroom that we were talking in, that I was presenting in. And I have a photo of him reading the book with all the students surrounding him. And it was just a moment. He was beaming, because the other story that I love is one of the things we talk about is being an upstander. So you see something that's happening that's wrong and you do something to make it right. So for example, you can choose to sit with somebody in the lunchroom, And so this student raised his hand and he was tearful. And he was saying that just the week before he had seen one student pick on another student and he hadn't done anything. And after hearing me talk about it, because one of the things I say is that I wish I had more upstanders when I was growing up, because it would have made such a big difference. And he said that going forward, he would be an upstander, that and he was crying. He was really emotional about it. And so this goes to, if I know that we've just impacted just a few kids, I feel like we're doing something right. And I love when they bring it back to their own lives. When they can say, I have a sibling who was born with a cleft, or somebody says, I wear hearing aids, or I, have a scar. I always ask anybody who has scars, and almost all the hands go up, because trying to make it relatable to their own lives too.
No, that's amazing. Like you said, if only that was in schools when we were younger, that would have been such a difference. Especially in a world now where with social media and ease of access to information. I've always lived my life believing that no kid is born like hating or judging another child, right? There's a lot
That
of
I agree with.
a lot of learned behaviors from adults, maybe parenting, and especially with it's like racism, sexism, ableism. It's like just with international folks. It's you're not born as a child hating someone else. If you can access the schools and get to talk to these children at a young age and just put it in their mind of just, and the teachers as well, because I think the teachers need a lot of educating on that as
I
well.
agree with you. I remember going into a school where there was a child with a facial difference, significant facial difference. They the faculty and the staff were amazing, but they had this child in school. They didn't quite know how to address it. And the thing that I remember is the social worker was almost talking for that student, and they mean well, right? They just don't quite know. And so sometimes I think we need to, for sure, educate. And I think we're hoping to do that, is to educate the teachers and the staff to how do you address, or what do you do if you have a student in your school that has a facial difference, or honestly any visible difference? Because I think they well-meaning, but they just don't know, and so I think that education is important too. And adults, I would love to figure out how we can educate adults, the parents, because I think sometimes they need it just as much, if not more, than the students, because exactly what you said, they're learning that behavior from somewhere. And so I agree with that. And unfortunately, I think we see it in our media too. And so I'm sure and social media is certainly not made, is, I think, made it more challenging, because you can be anonymous in what you say, even texting, right? There's some level of, you might text something, but if you saw them face to face, you probably might not say it. And so in some ways, I think it was easier when we were growing up, because we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have, at least I didn't, computers and all these texting and all these things that you can do. So I would go to school. Yeah, it would be hard, possibly, but then when I came home, I didn't have to deal with it. Now I think that all that teasing, being, and all that stuff that happens could be 24/7. That I'm not sure I'd want to be a child today for that very reason.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I was in a unique position when, cause I traveled a lot with tennis and around the world playing, and high level in international events, and I was getting abused from the sidelines. Just like, but
Wow.
that was at a time when social media was. I mean, Facebook was out, others were out, but it wasn't as like mainstream it is now.
Hmm.
But I agree with you. Like, this digital age has immense benefits. Like, we're doing this right now, whether it's
Exactly.
transacting memories, money, or anything like that. But when you can't, and that actually goes back to mental health with work, because if you're working with your brain all day, it's hard to switch off from work, and then you're still living in your brain. Whereas, decades ago, people would go to maybe warehouses or factories, and then they go home. So there's a different distinctive separation of life. Whereas now it is so hard to, you're working on a laptop all day or a computer, and maybe you're involved with social media for your work, but then you get home and you sat on the sofa and maybe you're watching TV, or you're also watching ending of the world news on a screen
Right.
like 6 inches in front of your face. So it kind of doesn't stop. So, and again, with a visible difference, you're vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, and
Right.
especially if you're producing amazing content like MyFace is with the Wonder Project and other content, or Paige with her Instagram stories, and Adam as well with the movie that's coming up. You have to accept that you're putting yourself in a position where you might receive messages, but that shouldn't be normal. That shouldn't be the case. And I said
Right.
before in a conversation, the day that we see someone on TV regularly with facial scarring or a port wine stain or cleft lip, and it's just normal. It's not like, oh, look, there's
Right.
so and so with so and so. It's more of a, oh, look, that's Adam on TV,
Right.
and that day will come. But, whether
Yeah.
it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, the work that you're doing in schools that hopefully transcends to them in adulthood will make a huge difference.
And I agree with you. I believe again, this wasn't being talked about 10, 20 years ago. Even I feel like it's just being talked about in the last 10 years or 8 years. And I feel like we have a while to go, but I feel like what's happening in the media and in schools and all of this is really positive movement, even if we do have a while to go. And I think, like you said, what we're doing at MyFace, what Paige and Adam and so many other advocates are doing, I think is going to hopefully change the landscape, and hopefully make it part of the larger conversation, because I also believe that we with facial differences are not part of the larger conversation and really need to be.
I don't know who I was speaking to, but I haven't been to an HR training, and I've done a fair share of those where the visible differences have been covered, and let alone disabilities, like use a ramp at work so people can access the the workplace,
Right.
and that's it.
Right.
That's it. I think once I brought it up to someone, I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to see folks with disabilities represented more, because you still don't see people with disabilities on TV.
Right. Yeah.
It's way further to go. And I brought up the visible differences, and I was told it's not a topic that we're really interested in at the moment. And I was like, wow, I guess I'll go sit down again then. So there's so much, when you mentioned talking to adults, there is so much opportunity to, whether it's Fortune 500 companies or New York entities, because you talk to these adults and then you get the message across them, they're going to go home and share it with their kids. And I remember talking to someone whose son had a cleft lip, and he had no idea that some of these organizations existed. So it's, once you start sharing those details, it's like, and it was the same for me when I went back to England for a couple of years. It was when I saw Changing Faces for the first time, it was like a revelation. I was like, wow, like, where's this been? And not because Changing Faces didn't make the effort to expand, because they're doing amazing work. It's more so I had no idea that I thought I was just living in my own little world. But there's thousands of people that have craniofacial differences, and it's an amazing community.
And that, I think, is exactly what you just said, is that realization that, wait, I'm not the only one. I think because I grew up thinking in some ways that I was the only one that had these experiences in school and in life and surgeries and all this. And then when I found that community 30 years ago, the beginnings of that, it was wow. And then coming to MyFace and hearing all the stories, it's like, wow, like I'm really not the only one that went through all these things. And it helps so much in some ways, because you realize you're not alone. So that, and it's funny because I worked now at MyFace for almost 12 years. And I always say that as much as I give, I get so much in return, because all these things have helped me so much and made me in some ways the person that I am today because of those realizations. And it makes me more willing to be vulnerable. I feel like I'm watching now the younger generations that I have watched grow up. Someone like Naomi, who's just so much more out there at 20 something, that I was not that child or that individual at 20 something. And so I feel like because of what we do at MyFace and the power of the work that we do, is giving these kids confidence at a much younger age and giving them a voice, because in some ways growing up, I lost my voice in some ways. And I think, so that I think is the power of MyFace, that sense of community. So anyway.
The community that MyFace has right now is unbelievable. Like Austin, Leah, Logan, amongst the young advocates at MyFace are just doing so much amazing work. Like I go on Instagram in the evening and I just see like all the work that's going on with It's a Wonder Project with Naomi, or Leah doing other work with other organizations, and just the positivity that exudes from like Austin getting on stage and creating bangers and dancing, and it's just unbelievable.
I don't know about you, but I was so not that person when I was in my 20s. That didn't exist in my world. I mean, in that same way. I mean, I did that performance in theater, but that was just a piece of it. Today, maybe I'm boasting too much, but I like to think, because of the work that's happening at MyFace and other organizations too, it's allowing for this to happen, and it makes me so proud and happy to see it.
No, it's amazing. Go back to the Wonder Project. What's been the biggest, biggest win in terms of feedback from kids or from schools? Have you left the school thinking, oh, I hope they listen, but actually you had people come up to you and say, like, that's one of the most amazing things I've heard?
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, those stories, I think when they bring it back to their own lives, and you see the excitement on their face when you say, I was born with a cleft lip, and somebody raises their hand and says, yes, like I too. And I never met somebody who had a cleft lip like me, and I think for them also is hearing the success stories. And Naomi and I go into schools, and Naomi talks about being a makeup artist and a photographer and now working at MyFace. And it, I think, gives the kids like a wow moment, like I can do this too, and especially if they have a visible difference, I think. And, I remember a story hearing about well, a kid saying, we talked about being an upstander and the different things you can do. And the teacher wrote to me afterwards and said that there was a kid who, was struggling to fit in, and there was a student that invited him to sit on the buddy bench with her or something like that. I don't remember the actual story. But those moments, it's like, okay, they're listening. And when we do the Q&A, is my favorite part, because again, it's like, oh, they're listening. They're like, they're asking really thoughtful questions. They want to know. They want to be, and I get letters from the students sometimes, and that I love getting the letters, because then again, I see the impact we're having. Sometimes you can't, measure the impact, and sometimes it's more the stories, and that to me is seeing the impact, is when I know and when I hear that how it's changed just one student's life, and hopefully they carry it on. And we can't always control what happens afterwards, but I have to believe that they are more aware and more thoughtful in how to be kind to others. And when we talk about different ways they can be kind, and asking them ways that they can be kind to others. And I really believe, as challenging as it is speaking to kindergarten, first, second graders, sometimes getting them when they're young, they're just curious. And so when they hear, oh, I have a hearing aid, oh, I can't see out of one eye, and I wear a prosthetic eye, and all these things, it's like, okay. And so it's really important to me that we educate kids at a young age, as challenging as it can be sometimes. Like, especially when they answer a question, they ask a question like, "What's your favorite color?" And yet, it's a great question, because here they are, they're trying to connect, and they just purple. My favorite color is purple too. So here's the similarities we have too, right? Like, it's just, oh, I love pizza. Oh, I love pizza too. Those sort of things. And so that's the kind of questions you get. And then they say, I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to do this or that. And so if that's all they're getting at that age, great, in my mind.
There was a concept I learned at business school about like not leading questions, but allowing like different leads from it. So, instead of just asking like, what's your favorite color, be what about the color purple makes you happy? And
Right.
it's like, oh, well, maybe it was the color of my front door. It was the color of my favorite shoes. And then that just creates connection, right? Like, oh, what's your favorite
Right.
shoe? And it just makes connecting and talking with people that much easier. I
The
feel
other
like a
thing
lot
I
of,
love is I've done presentations, and, afterwards, the student, a girl, will come up and say, I think you're beautiful. And then they were like, can I give you a hug? Those are some of the best moments too. It's like, so.
and you know that they're going to share that at home as well. And
Right.
you talk about like acute impact, but on a longer timeline, they're going home and telling mum and dad, or parents at home, that, or family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, that I learned this today, and it gets
Right.
them inquisitive and thinking like you mentioned, and I experienced, we didn't have that at school. Maybe they didn't have that at school, but if they've learned
Right.
that their son, daughter, nephew, niece has come home from school and is sharing this information, and it transcends, it gets more and more people thinking,
Exactly.
and it compounds. And yeah. So what's the future for the Wonder Project? Is it to get to more schools? Is it to
To
access
get
more
into
kids?
more schools, I think I have done so many in some ways, always with somebody typically, but so we are going to train more individuals to go out into schools. I've decided that I built this thing, I should let others do it too, which is something that's hard for me, but seeing Naomi and others do it, we should have more people out there, and I think that will help grow the number of schools that we do. So we're going to do a training program in August. We've revamped the program a bit, adding some new activities, creating one for high school and college students, because we can continue the conversation differently for the older ones, but I think, again, they need it as well. So we're doing that. And we are always thinking about how we can take it a little deeper. So, not just the presentation, but how do we have that continue in the school throughout the year? And so we're really thinking more about that as well.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. I just think constantly about, again, I know I've repeated myself. I don't want you to repeat either, but if we had this at schools when we were younger, the impact that it would have, and just know that you're not alone if you have a visible difference, and that it's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay. You don't have to worry. And mental health maybe would have been impacted as well. You don't have to spend 18 years of your life thinking in your own head, like, of why I look different and why people are making comments.
Yeah. That's so true.
So,
Yeah.
what is a couple of questions for you? The purpose of working for MyFace obviously is off the charts because it's such a close, it impacted you throughout your life. What is the biggest goal that you have moving forwards for yourself personally, whether it's work related or personally? Maybe it's related to MyFace or visible differences.
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is dating and relationships. For me, I always shied away from that, but I think it's something that I really thinking about more that I want to do. I've dabbled in it over the years, but really I want to be in a relationship with somebody. And so I'm thinking about dating and how to do that because it's completely daunting to me, and mostly because of my own, I think, insecurities around that. So that's something personally. And yet when a few years ago at MyFace, I created, because I thought if this is something that I have been dealing with, there are probably others. So we did a series of dating and relationship workshops, and I'd love to at some point bring that back as well, not just a little bit selfishly, but also for the community. And so that is something that is very much on my mind now. So, and just doing more for the communities, especially the kids, especially for starting school. And also, there's a certain age, I don't know, if it's 6, 7, or 8, when they know they're going in for surgery, and they know, they're starting school and they're dealing with all of this. And also, not just giving them the tools and for the parents too. And I have watched these parents advocate for their children like no other. I saw my mom do it too. Like, they will advocate so hard, but sometimes they don't quite know how to do it. And to be able to give that, we did a few years ago, and I think we're going to hopefully bring it back. Panel discussion on how do you advocate for your child when they're in school. Everything from the IEPs to, they're being bullied, or they need services, all of that. And so I think just giving them the tools, because sometimes that's all they need. How do I do this?
Give them the playbook to navigate life successfully. Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't agree more. Couldn't agree more. My grandma, when you have no power for 12 hours and you're just sweating inside your apartment, it's terrible. It's like, but thankfully it's back, so we're good. But it's still taking time to cool down. I met your mother. She's amazing. It might be your mother, but who is your role model growing up and maybe even today?
Well, my mother was certainly, I would say, my biggest advocate. My dad too, but I always remember my mom when I had surgery, especially as a child, and you couldn't technically stay in the hospital then. And she fought like heck to have me. She would stay in the hospital even when she wasn't supposed to. And she advocated hard for me throughout all of that. So, and when I write Mother's Day card, I always say, and it's true, like, she was my best friend in a lot of ways. And my dad too, always letting me know that I could do anything I put my mind to. And so they are in some ways my role model. I think my parents in some ways are my biggest role model. So my biggest support, and I model so much of what I do at MyFace and who I am as a person on what I learned from my parents. So
work that MyFace does and the Wonder Project, there's a lot of focus on kids, but a lot of parents need the guidelines and the roadmap as well of how to navigate. Like my parents, my dad, his mental health and parents' mental health would have been helped significantly if they had a product like MyFace produces, and maybe
I
your
agree.
parents as well, and other
Yeah.
parents. And
Again, they didn't have that growing up either. I mean, when I was growing up. So, and so I'm sure they didn't always get it right. And I don't even think even with a playbook, you get it right. I mean, it's, you learn as you go. But I think, yeah, I think that, that's what I love about MyFace today, is that we have all these things. And that's what my goal was when I came into the role, is to let them have all the things that I didn't have growing up, and I think we're doing that and more. And it's exciting to see it.
Yeah.
And I'm just chomping at the bit. Like, I want to do more, more, more. And Bill, who's our executive director, reminds me that all this stuff will happen, but it can't happen all at once. And I just want to keep doing more, more, more. So, but we're doing a lot. So
I think I've said to you, Karen and Bill, I think MyFace has the potential to be that biggest organization in the US regarding facial differences and community, mental health, being the intersection of all of that, and self-acceptance and self-journey. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing about the Wonder Project, which I think is amazing. And hopefully we can get into schools down here in DC as well.
So we're already booking now.
Yeah. Cool. I will attach where people can find you, where people can find MyFace, people can find the Wonder. I'll also attach the Wonder Project book as well.
Okay.
So people can read that. Do you have any final comments or words of motivation or affirmation for people who might listen to this?
I would say keep doing what you're doing, and don't let anybody bring you down, and that you are amazing. And it's not an easy road. It's a winding road, but it is a road worth traveling. So yeah, that's what I'll say. Very cliche, but I'll say it anyway.
I love it. I do love a cliche statement. It's great.
Yeah.
But it's true as well. So thank you, Dina. You're a legend. The people at MyFace are all amazing. My life has gotten better since learning more about MyFace a couple of years ago, meeting people like you and others at the organization regularly. And yeah, the work that MyFace is doing is, I think, one of the most meaningful, not just on a personal level, but the most meaningful work that an organization can do to better the lives of others, because it encompasses a huge range. Yeah, I've only got positive things to say. So thank you, Dina, and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for having me.